Good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I was in the wrong webinar. I was in tomorrow's one. Just give everyone a minute to jump in. Cool. Okay. So welcome back, everyone. This is a continuation of our 3-series webinar that we started yesterday. So hopefully you all followed up yesterday and are continuing with us today on the next webinar. So let's just get straight into it. I've got a few things to look at today. So first thing I'm going to do is share my screen. And same as yesterday, just raise your hand if you can all see and hear me and can see my screen being shared in front of you. Beauty, thank you. Okay, so yesterday we had a quick and basic introduction over the Solution 3000. Today we're going to look at the program and configuration, and tomorrow we're going to look at the B426M and A-Link programming. And same as yesterday, down the bottom we've got the Q&A button down the bottom. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, just hit the Q&A, type your question, and we'll follow up with that at the end of the webinar. And another thing I just want to test quickly is, I just want to see if this works. So usually in the training, we would provide a paneling keypad. So raise your hand if you have a paneling keypad in front of you. No one? Oh, there's a few of you. Good. Okay. But I've got a little setup here in front of me. So for those of you who don't have a paneling keypad, I'm going to try and show you on the camera. So I'm glad that works. So let's go back to the slide. Okay. All right, so what are we going to be looking at today? We're going to be looking at the board layouts, the basic operation, programming one-on-one, zones, monitoring setup, entry-exit delays, pin codes, partitioning, and programming outputs. So let's have a look at the board layout. Has everyone got their manual? How many people have a manual with them today? A couple of you. Okay, cool. All right, so hopefully most of you are familiar with the Bosch panels, but today we're going to be looking at the board layout of the 3000. The 2000 is slightly different, but let's just focus on this one for the moment. So similar to all the other Bosch panels, down the bottom left-hand corner, you have your AC input. Then you have your battery terminal connectors, 2 keypad buses. So you've got power A, B, and common, and then another power A, B, and common. A lot of people ask me, doesn't matter which one I connect the keypads to, it doesn't. They both commoned up in the PCB, so you can wire it up in this one or this one. I think they've put 2 there because you can have so many modules connected to it, so they've just given you another connection to connect your modules to. Then we have our outputs. We have output 1, 2, 3, and 4 is our onboard relay. We'll talk more a little bit about that later. And then we have our zone inputs 1, 2, 3, 4, positive and negative to power up our detectors or smoke detectors or whatever you're connecting to it. And then around the corner, we have another terminal block for your positive and negative, and some more zones from 5 to 8, a designated tamper input. So this tamper input is just a dry contact. So every time you have I've got one here in front of me, actually, I'll just try and rip it out. Every time you obviously buy a panel, you get a tamper switch. So you've got your little plunger and your 2 connectors. You just connect that directly into your tamper input. You don't need an end-of-line resistor or anything. You just shove it in there and you're good to go. Then you have your We800 port. So if you remember yesterday, we were talking about receivers, and this little white plug is where you would connect the TR800. And remember, this little white plug, if you're using the little plug on the board like that, it doesn't support wireless detectors. If you want wireless detectors on the 3000, you need the Radeon receiver or the new CSP TR800BR receiver, and you wire that into your keypad bus. And then you've also got your telephone input for your old school PSTN or for your PIMCONs or T4000s or whatever you're using these days. Your default button, so if you need to factory reset your panel back to factory settings, all you got to do is power down the panel, so completely power down with your AC and battery, push and hold down the button, power up the panel, count to 5, and then release. And if all's gone to plan, you should hopefully have reset your panel for you. Then you also have the onboard LED indicator. Slow flashing means it's normal. Steady on means firmware update is in progress. If it's off, you have no power or you've overloaded your panel. And if it's rapid flashing, it's finished doing the firmware update or defaulting the panel. You've also got this little white plug. So this little white plug over here, I don't know if you remember yesterday, I was talking about the little jumpers. So if you want to add a B426M or a B308 output expander, you've got the little loom. You could just plug it onto that little plug over there and then plug it onto the new module, and you don't need to hardwire it. And then you've got the little 3 pins over here. So these 3 little pins come with a jumper, and this jumper will specify the common of the relay. So can you all see my mouse moving? Put your hand up if you can see that moving. Okay, thank you. So the common and ground, if you put it on common and ground, that would specify this common is going to be a negative, or common and positive, it will specify this common as a positive. And that's just a quick and easy way to save you looping from your positive or negative to specify if that's a positive or negative trigger on that relay. And that's also handy because if you're rocking up to site and you want to open the panel and you don't have any user codes or anything like that, and you don't want to activate because there's kids in the building, you might freak out or something like that. So you can quickly open the panel and just remove that little jumper, and that will disable your internal sirens, because this little relay is your internal sirens. The external siren will still activate it if it's connected to output 1, which is your horn driver. So hopefully that makes sense. What's next? So zone doubling. So you remember on this panel, you have 8 inputs, but you can have 16 detectors on this panel if you're using zone doubling. So because this alarm uses 16, because this alarm uses zone doubling, 16 individual sensors can be wired into the panel using 8 zone terminals. 2 sensors are wired into each input, and the use of a 3K3 or 6K8 resistor allows the panel to differentiate between zones. So as you can see here in this little diagram, we have zone 1 and zone 9, both connected into zone 1. And the way that the panel differentiates between zone 1 and zone 9, because they're both sharing the same input, is they use a different end-of-line resistor. So your low zones, which are your zones 1 to 8, would use 3K3s, and then your high zones, which you'd also wire into zone 1 to 8, but you would use a 6K8s to indicate that they're a zone 9 to 16. So hopefully that makes sense with you all. Does that all make sense? Put your hands up if that makes sense. Come on, only 10 of you. Come on. Yeah, well, with your Q&A, we will revisit that at the end of the webinar. Oh, how do I minimize that? Here we go. Okay, basic operation. So the icon keypad uses a series of icons to display the alarm status. Zones are listed 1 to 16, and when a zone is opened, the number will be displayed. During and after the alarm, the relevant zone number will flash until the next alarm. So on your keypad, you can see you have your zone indicators. Over here, we got 1 to 8. We've got the little house. That's the indicator to indicate the state of the alarm. So if there's no one in the house, that means it's disarmed. If there's someone in the house, that means it's armed in stay mode. Do you all know what stay mode means? Put your hands up if you know what stay mode means. Okay, we'll talk about it a little bit more a bit later, but looks like a lot of you know what it is. excuse me, and then the little man outside of the house, that means everyone's away. If the little man is in and out the house, that means it's in programming mode. We've got the little triangle with the exclamation mark. That means that there's a fault present on the system, and we'll talk about viewing the faults shortly. And the main's on the bottom left-hand corner. If it's flashing, that means there's no power or no AC going into your board. And if it's on, that means it's all happy and good to go. Okay, reading faults. So to read faults on the system, you got to push and hold down the number 5 button. This will bring up the stay and away indicator, and the little man in and out the house will display to show that you're in fault analysis mode. So if we view our next slide, we can view what faults our panel have and how we should fix them. So if we push and hold down number 5, so let's just try this. I'm going to bring up my other window. Bring up the old VLC media player. And I think this might be a little bit laggy, but we'll see how we go. So can you all see the camera? Is that all good? Okay, treat. So you can see on the keypad, I'll just wake it up. We can see all of our zones. Get that out of the way. So we got our zones 1 to 8. 8 is flashing to indicate that we have a activation, which is our tamper, and we have power, we've got AC, we've got a fault, and it's flashing just to show that we have an activation. So to view our faults, all we got to do is push and hold down the number 5 button. That'll beep, and now we can see we have number 1, and if we push number 1, it'll bring up number 2. So there's 2 layers of faults that we can view. So we push and hold down number 5, we have the top layer, which is number 1, and then the lower layer, which is number 2. So if we go back to our little diagram over here, so you can see we came up with a number 1 and then number 2. So that means we have a date and time fail. Another common one is battery. There's also comms fail. So if we get a 6 and a 1, 2, 3, 4, that would mean receiver fail, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or a 5 and 6 is IP fail. Another common one is 7 and 3. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. You know what a 7 and 3 is? How many of you have done this? So a 7 and 3, that means if you look at it properly, you got a 1 and a 2, which indicates our output expander 1 and 2. So a 3 is keypad 1, a 4 is keypad 2, a 5 is keypad 3, and so on. So what that is, keypad 1 fail on the back of the keypad. I'll just go back to my old my camera. So on the back of the keypad, you got a little tamper switch. Rip it open. Come on, how many of you guys have lost your tamper switch? Put your hand up. Yeah, I know it. So on the back of your keypad, you have your little tamper switch there, and everyone loses that. So you can see there, they can easily get knocked off, and then you mount it to the wall and you wonder, why am I getting a 7 and a 3 coming up? And that's your problem, because everyone loses that little tamper switch. So just be aware of that. And you can hear it beeping because there's a fault. So we'll go back to my slide. Okay, so that pretty much covers that. So how to arm and disarm? There are 2 modes for arming the panel. We have away and stay mode. So away mode, you're away from the house and the system is fully armed. Everything is turned on. Stay mode, you're staying at home and you need secure entry points. For example, you have an upstairs and a downstairs, and you want to be able to move around upstairs but turn on downstairs at nighttime. You can pre-program the panel to automatically bypass the upstairs detectors, so you're free to move around, but have downstairs all fully armed for you. So you can have protection downstairs, but still be able to move around upstairs. And to put it in away and stay mode is pretty straightforward. You just hit the, put in your user code and hit the away mode. And to put it in stay mode, user code and stay mode. So if I jump back to my camera, see over here, we've got a few faults, don't worry about that. And if we go 2580 away, see the little man leaves the house, that's in away mode, disarm that, and 2580 stay, little man's in the house, so that's in stay mode. You can also disarm the system from away mode in stay mode. So if you go 2580 and put it away mode, you can also go 2580 stay, and that will disarm the system. So it's pretty much like a toggle for you. Oh, Peter's saying it's frozen. Is that frozen, everyone? Okay, well, maybe I won't share that because I don't think my, I don't know, some people say it's working. Okay, it's laggy, yeah. Sorry, everyone, I think my computer's struggling with screen sharing, pulling an RTSP stream from a camera and doing a Zoom call at once. So we'll see how we go. Yeah, maybe I'll stop that for now. And get all these windows out of the way. Oh, geez, there we go. Sorry, 1 second. Just trying to figure this out. I think this was a bad idea. Close. Stop that. All right. Okay, back to the slides. Sorry about that, everyone. So hopefully that makes sense. What's next? User pin authority levels. So there is a capacity of 32 user pins in a Solution 3000, and these are the 3 of the most common authority levels that apply to each pin. So you can arm and disarm and have the master privilege. You can arm and disarm and also arm only. So only the master code user has the ability to make changes to the panels, such as changing pins and setting the date and times. Pins can be changed in programming and by the master user. Authority levels can only be changed in the installer program. So let's have a quick look at changing our user codes through the master function. So the command for changing pin codes is master code 1 hash. And then we select the user number hash, and then we add a new code and hit the hash button. So I'll just try this camera thing again. We'll see how we go. Okay, so what we're going to do now is add a code through our master code. So we know our master code at the moment is default 2580. So if we want to add user 2, for example, we would go 25801 hash 2 for user 2 hash, and we'll just put in a code in there called 6789. So if we go 6789 hash, and that should be all good to go. So now we can test that. If we go 6789 hash, you can see it's allowing us to turn it on, and we can turn it off. And to delete a code, it's pretty similar. We go 25801. That's a master code to add and delete codes. If we want to delete user 2, we go 2 hash stay, and the stay button will delete the code out of the system. So if we go 6789 hash, you can see it's not in the system anymore. So master code 1 hash is to add and delete user codes. Cool. Okay, setting the dates and time. So setting and date and time is another master user function. Setting the date and time as a user function is achieved with the master code followed by command number 6. So if we go 25806 hash, And then we enter the day, month, year, hour, minutes, minute. That will allow us to set or update our date and time. Now, a problem with this is some people enter the year as 4 digits, but the system only requires 2 digits. So they insert the day, month, year, hour, minute, and then hit hash, and you get an error beep. So just remember, if you're entering the year, it has to be 2-1 for 2021 instead of 2021. Just put in the 2-1. So I'll just give you a quick example of that. Hit the play button. It should load up in a second. Boom. Okay, cool. So if we go, you can see we got the fault at the moment. Oh, where is it? Here it is. So we have the fault. If we push and hold down number 5, we have number 1 and number 2. So 1 is battery. I don't have a battery connected. Number 2 is the date and time. So now we want to update the date and time. So if we go 25806 hash. Yep, and then we can enter the day, month, year, hour, minute. So what is the date today? 26/08/21, and I think the time's around 10:30. So we go 10:30. Boom. So we can still see it. We have a fault because that's my battery. Hopefully, here we can see we only have battery. Our number 2 is cleared now. Okay, that makes sense. Programming 101. So how do we enter installer mode? So by default, the installer code is 1234, and to enter installer mode, you'd enter 1234 and away. Once you've been in installer mode and you've made all your changes, you can push 960 hash. That will save and exit. But if you like most people on the older classic panels, a lot of people get confused with which manual to use. Like they get confused with the CC488 or ICP CC488. They got 2 different manuals, and they program up the wrong panel with the wrong manual, and they go, oh crap, I've programmed the wrong locations. So if you've done that, or you don't want to save it for whatever reason, you can enter or put in 958 hash. That will exit and not save, and you won't screw up your programming. So if you've done that before, raise your hand. Oh, whatever, you're lying. Oh, Simon, yeah, I know you've done it. Peter, yep. Cool, so just remember, if you've done that 958 hash, that will save and not exit, and not many people know about that, so that'll get you out of trouble. Okay, location theory. The panel uses 4-digit programming addresses referred to as locations. Locations store a value that range from 0 to 15. These values are displayed on the keypad screen using the zone indicators, and a value of 0 is displayed as a blank because we don't have a zone indicator for a 0. So if there's nothing there, it's a 0. So the hash key takes you away to the location that you want to enter. For example, pressing 395 away, that'll take you away to that location. And if you are in location 395 and you push 1 and stay, that will save that option in that location. So just to make sure you're all listening and have a manual in front of you, the first one to tell me what location 395 is will win a chocolate fish, and I'll send that in the mail maybe tomorrow. So does anyone know what location 395 is? Nope. Okay. So location 395 is our RF receiver. So you can see if we enter installer mode, we go to location 395. So you'd enter 395 away. That'll take you away to program this location. And you can see over here, we have 3 options. By default, we have a 0. And then we have an option 1 for Radeon receiver, or an option 2 for We800 EB2 receiver. So if we put a 1 in there and push stay, that will pretty much save the 1 in location 395, telling the panel that we're using a Radeon receiver. So just to give you a bit of a example, is that working? Yep. So over here you can see the keypad. And if we enter installer mode, 1, 2, 3, 4 away. and we want to go to location 395. So we push 395 away. You can see we have 0 in there because we don't have anything on the screen. And we want to say 1 because we're using the radio on receiver. So we go 1, stay, and you can see it's put a 1 in there for us now. 960 to save and exit, and we're good to go. Now, another thing I'll just point out quickly, you can see our zone 8 is activated, which is our onboard tempo. So a bit of a quirk with these panels, every time you exit installer mode, if your tamper's open, it'll put it in an activation. And if your sirens are not connected, you don't actually know it's in an activation. So what I'm trying to get at is if you're trying to go back into installer mode now, you go 1, 2, 3, 4 away, you go, it's not letting me into install mode. What's going on? The problem is it's an activation, so we need to disarm the panel first, shut it up, and then it will allow us to go back into installer mode. So I get a lot of calls about that, so it's just a little bit of a quirk with our panel. So just remember, if you exit install mode and your tamper's open, you need to dis or unset the system before it'll let you go back into installer mode. Okay. Adding a key fob. So unlike classic panels, key fobs don't replace a user. Instead, they supplement a user. Each of the 32 users have one key fob assigned to that user. So with the older classic series panels, you would have user 1 to 8 allocated for your user codes, and then 9 to 16 would be allocated for your remotes. So it's different with the 3000. You can have user 1, which you can allocate a user code to, and a key fob. So both your user code and key fob is allocated to the same user. And to add a key fob, I'm not going to do it because I don't have a receiver in front of me, but you pretty much enter your user code 1#, 301. So 301 would be for user 1, 302 for user 2, 303 for user 3, and so on. And then ##, that will take you into your auto learn mode, and that will bring up your zone indicators 1 to 16, indicating that it's in auto learn mode. And then you just push a button on your remote and it will beep on the keypad, and then you know that you've allocated the remote to that user. I should have brought a wireless receiver with me, but oh well. So just remember master code 1, 301 for the user code, ##, push the button on your remote, and that will learn it into the system for you. And it's the same thing to delete it, master code 1#, 301#, and then stay, that will delete it out of the system for you. Adding an RF zone is very similar. Wireless zones replace onboard zones. By learning an RF zone into zone 1, for example, the hardwired zone 1 is ignored in favor of the RF device. Learning RF zones are identical to learning remotes, except for the command. So because we pretty much only want installers to only have the ability to add and delete our zones, only the installer can do that. So to do that, we enter our installer code 0#, and then our zone number 1 to 16, ##. That will put it in auto learn mode again, bringing and indicating your zone indicators 1 to 16 on the keypad. And then you can just tamper it. That will send a signal to the keypad and beep, or a signal to the receiver that will beep on the keypad to confirm that it's received the signal and we've allocated that wireless detector to that zone. Now let's talk a little bit about our zones. For each of the 16 zones, there are 6 programmable options that define the panel's response to the zone status. The first and most important option is the zone type, which defines how the panel should respond. Each type is represented by a zone number. So over here, you can see we have a little table of our zone 1. And we have 6 options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 options. No, 6 because reserve doesn't count. So each zone 1 to 16 will have all of these options available. And at the moment, we're looking at the zone type. So this pretty much tells the panel what the zone type is, if it's an entry exit or an instant or a 24-hour smoke or whatever. We just navigate to the appropriate location and put in a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or whatever zone type we need. So let's have a look at the most common zone types. There's a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the most common ones are our entry and exit delays, handover and instant. So our delay will follow our entry and exit delay, which we'll cover a little bit later. Handover zones. Do you all understand what handover zones, also known as followers? Just raise your hand, but I'll go over it anyway. Zones programmed as handovers, as handover type, will sound the alarm instantly without delay when triggered first. However, if a delay type zone has been tripped first, the handover zone is ignored, allowing the user to walk past it to disarm the system. Hopefully that makes sense. There's another common one we use, which is our 24-hour zones. The 24-hour zones will always activate regardless if the system is armed or disarmed. The only difference is how they report through to the monitoring companies. So we have a few of them. We have 24-hour fire, 24-hour tamper, 24-hour holdup, 24-hour medical, 24-hour panic, and 24-hour burglaries. So as I've said already, if the system is set or unset, if any of them open or close at any time, they will activate instantly and send a signal to the monitoring company specifying if it's a fire or a tamper or holdup or whatever. Oh, Peter, you got the RF receiver. Give me my fish. All right, your fish is coming out to you. Okay, another common one is your zone type 11, which is your key switch. So this is pretty old school. Back in the day before they had clever keypads, they would just have a key switch and you'd have a key switch on the wall and a key, and you put your key switch and go switch, switch, and that would arm or disarm the panel for you. So it's pretty old school, but they're pretty commonly used these days still with your likes of your Permacons or your T4000s. I understand, well, we don't sell Permacons, but the Permacon has an output. How many of you installed Permacons with a key switch? Put your hand up. Yeah, a whole bunch of you. Awesome. Yeah, so on the Permacon app, you have an arm and a disarm button that will trigger an output to toggle the key switch. So that way you can remotely set or unset the system using the key switch input using third-party systems. Another common one, or it's not too common, is your chime zone. So that's like your typical dairy. You walk in, your detector sees movement, and the keypad goes bing bong, or whatever noise it makes, just to indicate that that detector is triggered. And then also, if you're not using a zone, so in your typical residential installation, you probably have 4 or 5 zones. So if you're using 5 zones, you're not going to be using 6, 7, and 8. So you need to go to your zone type for 6, 7, and 8 and put a 15 in there, and that'll disable that zone for you. Pulse counting. Pulse counting is a useful way to mitigate false alarms caused by difficult environments, such as pets left in a house while the area is armed. So we have a pretty good pet immune detectors, but sometimes cats can be tricky. They jump on couches and climb up curtains and do all sorts of weird stuff. So usually pulse counting is your last resort. I don't recommend that you do it. Usually you try and get away with it, but if you're having a lot of problems, there is zone pulse counting available. And what this does is you can program the amount of times the detector needs to trigger with it in a time period before it would activate that zone. For example, over here, you've got your zone pulse count. If we put a 2 in there, and then your zone pulse count time, we could put a 15 in there for 15 seconds. So pretty much what we're saying is that zone needs to trigger twice within 15 seconds before it activates that zone. And just to confuse everybody, if you look at the table, I said 15 seconds, but you actually program a 7, just to confuse everyone. So if you look over here, you put a 1 for 1 second, 2 for 2. But once you get up to 6 or 10 seconds, you need to program a 6. 15 seconds, program is a 7, and so on. So just make sure that you're aware of that when you're programming your pulse counting times. Cool. Options theory, this confuses everyone, so stay with me here. Because programming locations can contain a value of 0 to 15, this allows more than one item to be configured by one location. Instead of having 4 separate locations programmed with a 1 or a 0, 4 options are condensed into a location programmed with a 0 to a 15. So for example, over here, you can see we have a W, X, Y, and Z. And if all options are required, add all of them together. So if we're using 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is 1, 2, 4, and 8, we need to add them all together and program them as a 15. If only 2 and 8 are required, option X and option Z, you plus 8 plus 2 is a 10. And if none of these options are required, enter them as a value. And just to give you a bit of an understanding of what I'm talking about, your zone options 1, no, we'll go to the zone options 2. So zone options 2 is a 14. So this is how you would program your stay zones. So if we have a look at our zone options, this is our 2, 4, 8, and 14, which I was talking about before. So you can see 2 basically means zone isolation is allowed. 4 means force arming allowed. 8 means zone restore report allowed. But if we want to say this zone is isolated in stay mode, so remember we spoke about stay mode, we want to say that this zone could be the master bedroom. So if you want to automatically isolate that zone in stay mode, you'd program this one as a 15. So you can see zone options 2 default is a 14. So we want to add, so at the moment we got 2, 4, and 8, which is a 14. So we want to add 1, which means we want to enable isolated in stay mode. So we'd add 14 plus 1 is 15. So we would go over here and throw in a 15 in there. And then when you'd enter your master code and stay, that would automatically isolate that zone for you. Hopefully that makes sense. Put your hands up if that makes sense. Okay, that'll do. Yeah, it's difficult to explain. Okay, communications monitoring. So with the 3000, there are 5 different modes of communications available on this panel. All except for push notifications take up one of the 4 available receivers. So there are 2 options for the dialer. We have the built-in dialer, and that allows us to communicate to the monitoring company through your old school PSTN phone line or your analog phone line, communicating in contact ID format. And also domestic, you can set it up for domestic dials. So if you're not monitored, you can program the panel to call you. You'll receive a call from your house and you pick up the phone and you hear a so that's that means that your system is activated when you're away. You can also have IP monitoring. So this communicates using the B426M Ethernet module or the B450M GPRS module, which we spoke about yesterday. This will communicate to the monitoring company over IP using CSV IP. You can also program them to send you email notifications. And if you're using the app will send you push notifications when there's an activation. If you are using if you're using CSV IP, shut that up quick. If you're using CSV IP, you need to use your laptop because there's no way that I'm aware of to program IP addresses through the keypad or port numbers. So you'll need your A-Link software to connect to the panel, and then you can program your IP addresses to your monitoring station. PSTN monitoring. So by default, the panel is set up to communicate with the monitoring station in contact ID format by telephone on receiver 1. Telephone numbers for receiver 1 are stored 1 digit per location from 000 to 015. So for example, if you're if you're trying to program your installer number, for example, 0800 83 83 83, just write in the chat if you know what phone number that is. you need to program each digit individually. So if you're struggling to understand what I'm talking about, this might give you a little bit better idea. So over here, you can see 0, 0, 0, we have a 0, 0, 0, 1, we have an 8, 0, 0, 2, we have a 0, and so on. So pretty much what you got to do is go to location 0, 0, 0, hit the away button, and then you can go 0, stay away, 8, stay away, 0, stay away, 0, stay away, and keep going. And you all got the phone number, which is Pizza Hut. Well done, everyone. Cool. So I'll just give you a bit of a demo of how to program these phone numbers, because it's a bit difficult to comprehend by just explaining over. I'll just share that, hit the play button so it doesn't slow down my computer. Over here, if we enter installer mode, 1, 2, 3, 4 away. Yeah, you see what I mean? Zone 8 is activated, so we need to disarm that first to shut it up. Okay, we're happy. Now we can go 1, 2, 3, 4 to get into our install mode. And we go 0, 0, 0 away. Okay, we have a 15. That means it's disabled. So now we want to program our phone number. So we go 0, stay away, 8, stay away, 0, stay away, 0, stay away, 8, stay away, 3, stay away, 8, stay away, 3, stay away, 8, stay away, 3, stay away. And you can also go back to the location to confirm that you've done it correctly. So if you go back to 0, 0, 0, you can see this is 0. So there's nothing indicated on our display. And every time you hit the away button, that will skip to the following location. So we get 0, 0, 0. If we hit the 0 button, it'll go to 0, 0, 1, which is 8. And you can just skip through it like that to confirm that the phone number is correct. Also, the stay button is backwards, so that will take you back in locations. Save and exit, and we're good to go. And I'm going to disable that tamper because it's annoying. 316, 15, stay away, 960 away, and zone 8 is disabled, so it's not going to annoy us each time. Okie dokie. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Monitoring account. The other thing you need to set up for monitoring is the subscriber ID, also referred to as the account number. This identifies the panel to the monitoring station, and they will provide this to you. The subscriber ID is always 4 digits long, but there are 6 programming locations for it. Lead the number with 2 zeros. So for example, I'll just move this little window out of my way because it's bugging me. So for example, if we get given account number 3435, we need to program that as a 003435. If we don't do that, it's not going to report as account number 3435. If we enter 343500, it's going to report through to account number 343,500. And just imagine how much money they're making if they have that many accounts. So that would be really cool. So that's one thing to remember. Just basically go straight to location 36 and enter your installer number from there. Not installer number, subscriber ID number, sorry. Okay, monitoring test mode. Another thing that isn't in this webinar is the 24-hour test. Just remember, you need to program your account number, your phone numbers, and your 24-hour test time and intervals. If you don't program your 24-hour test time and your interval of 1 for every day, you're going to be back in a week's time wondering why it's not sending a 24-hour test, because default it's not enabled. Okay, monitoring test mode. So we programmed up our monitoring to communicate with our monitoring company, and we test it. So what I usually do is do a real life test. I'd arm the system, go for a run around, make sure I activate all of my detectors or smoke detectors, and they all send through a signal to the monitoring company, and then I call them up and double check, make sure that they've received the signal for each zone. But there is another way you can do it. Just to send a quick and easy test signal through, you can push and hold down the number 9 key on the keypad. That will beep 3 times, and in the background, it's going to send through a quick manual test report through to the monitoring company. You can also test the report monitor mode, which is installer code 6#. And what this does, it'll tell you if it's not communicating, it'll indicate to you where it's getting stuck. So if you go installer code 6#, that will bring up your zone indicators on the keypad, 1 to 5. So 1 means the panel has picked up the phone and it sees the phone line. Number 2 means it's dialing the phone number that we've programmed, 0800 83 83 83, or the IP address that we programmed in for the CSV IP reporting. 3 means it's got a handshake from the receiver at the monitoring company. And then the panel goes, okay, I've got through to my destination, and it's going to, number 4, send through all of its information. I won't make the funny beeps and whistles this time because it's embarrassing. And then 5, once it's finished sending all of its information, it'll just it'll give a kiss off and hang up the phone, or hang up the phone, and hopefully not have any comms issues. But usually where it gets stuck is phone line or dialing and not getting the handshake from the receiver. So it's picking up the phone number, or it's picking up the phone line, dialing the number through to the receiver, and the receiver's not answering because you put in the wrong phone number or IP address or something like that. So hopefully you found that helpful. Delay times. So this is your entry and exit delay times. Time parameters in programming uses 2 locations, one for multiples of 1 second and another for multiples of 16 seconds, which are then added together. So for example, if we're looking at our entry delay time at location 466 and 467. So 466 is increments of 1 second. So if we program a 4 in there, we're saying 4 seconds. And location 467 is increments of 16 seconds. So if we put a 1 in there, that's 1 16 seconds, if that makes sense. So then you'd add the 4 plus 16 together, giving you a total of 20 seconds. So you kind of need to do your maths to figure out your entry and exit times. So just to go over that again, for example, in your exit delay times, if you program a 1, or if you program a 12 in 470, that'll give you 12 seconds. And in 471, if you program a 3, that'll give you 3 times 16 is 48. And then you pretty much add the 12 and the 48 together, giving you 60 seconds. So bit of a head scratch. If you're anything like me and bad at maths, you'll struggle with that, but it's not too bad once you get your head around with it. Does that all make sense? Hit the hands up if that does, please. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Next slide. User PIN codes and installer codes. So the installer code should always be changed to 1, 2, 3, 4. The installer code should always be changed. 1, 2, 3, 4 is not secure at all. So I'm sure you all work for companies that have your own installer codes. And to install or enter your installer codes, you do this in location 181 to 184. And for example, if I bring up my camera again, so if I go into install mode, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know my location for the installer code is 181. So if I go to location 181 away, and I'll change it to 1397. 1, stay away. 3, stay away. 9, stay away. 7, stay away. So we go back to 181. I'd usually double check that first just to make sure I haven't screwed that up, because there's nothing worse than programming a whole panel and then screwing up your installer code and you've got to default it and reprogram it again. And raise your hand if you've done that before, because I know I have. Yeah, I can see a whole bunch of you. Cool. So if we double check that, I can go back to 181. We've got a 1, 3, 9, 7. save and exit. And now if I test my old installer code, which was 1234, it won't let me in. I need to enter our new one, 1397, and away we go. Okay, and user codes. The panel's 32 user pins can be managed by the master user, as mentioned earlier in the training, but you can also manually program these, or not manually, but program them through the installer menu. So there's 32 user codes, and each of them, same as the installer code, has an individual address. So you just go to these addresses and program your digits, and away you go. There's also the authority level location. So remember, only the installer can edit the authority levels. And there's another table that would indicate what authorities or what user functions they can and cannot do. So remember, the main one is master user, arm and disarm, and arm only. Okay, let's talk about partitioning. So the 3000 has 2 partitions available, and partitioning is simplified with the Solution 3000 because technically it is already partitioned to just one area. To create a second area, only 3 things need to be assigned to it: a code, a keypad, and a user code. By default, every zone, every user, and keypad 1 are assigned to area 1. Because of this, the system operates as a normal single area. Any of these items can have their assignments changed to a 1 or a 2, and in doing this, the panel becomes partitioned. So I don't know if you've ever done partitioning on a older ICP CC488 or something. Bit of a nightmare, but this one is really easy. So remember at the beginning, we learned that no device that connects to the panel will work unless it's enabled in programming, except for keypad 1. So over here, you can see in location 518, keypad 1 is enabled already, only to area 1. You can also enable keypad 2, 3, and 4. So you can see at the moment they have by default zeros in them, which means they're disabled. So if you program them as a 1, that will allocate their keypad to area 1. You put in a 2, it'll allocate them to area 2. And if you put in a 3, it'll allocate them to area 1 and 2. Also, don't forget on the back of the keypad, share my camera again. On the back of your keypad, you need to update your dip switches. Hopefully you can see that over there. So you've got your dip switches. So keypad 1 dip switch address is 1 and 6. Keypad 2 is 2 and 6. Keypad 3 is 1, 2, and 6. And I don't remember what keypad 4 is off the top of my head. So I think there's a little diagram in here. And keypad 4 is 3, 3, and 6. There you go. Okay, so we've assigned our keypads to an area. And just remember, if you do have a second keypad, you need to, like I just said, allocate it in location 519, allocate it to an area, and update the dip switches. Okay, partitioning for zones. So all zones are already assigned to area 1. So all that needs to change is zone area allocation from a 1 to a 2. So say, for example, we have zone 1 to 8 can be our shop 1, and zone 9 to 16 will be shop 2 for our area 2. So for all of our zones in shop number 2, we need to allocate them to area 2. So we'd have to change your zone 9 to 16 and program these all as number 2s. So that's saying all of these zones 9 to 16 are allocated to area 2. Piece of cake. The same thing with user codes. They're all allocated user code 1 to 32. I just realized it only goes up to 24. I'm not too sure why, but you have 32 user codes on this panel. And all you need to do is change your, if you want to assign, say, similar to our zones, user code 1 to 8 for area 1, and then 9 to 16, you change them all to area 2 to allocate them to area 2. But also you can, for your zones and users, you can actually allocate them to both areas. So if you're the building owner, you want access to shop A and shop B. So when you changing or assigning his user code to that area, you'd program it as a 3, and that would allocate him to both areas. Same thing for your zones. So if you have a common entry, like a common entry hallway, and then you walk into shop A or B, you can have that detector allocated to both areas. So only when both of those areas are armed, then that hallway detector will follow those areas and also turn on for you or activate for you, if that makes sense. Cool. Outputs. The solution has 4 onboard outputs and a capacity for an additional 16 outputs by the use of the 2 B308 8-way output expanders, which we had a look at yesterday. Output 1 is your default horn speaker. Output 2 is your smoke detector power. Output 3 is your strobe light, and output 4 is your internal piezo. Output programming consists of 3 building blocks. You have the event code, polarity, and your time units, or your time base and time base multiplier. So your event code is why is this output going to turn on? And if you look in your manual, there's like, I think, at least a big page full of different event codes that you can program it to do almost anything you want. So your event code is why, or when this happens, turn on the output. Your polarity is basically saying, when this output turns on, what is it doing? And your time base and time base multiply is saying, how long is this output going to turn on for? So why, how, and how long? So for example, your output 3 default programming is a 2-0, which if you look in your manual is a strobe. Your polarity is a 6, normally open 1 shot low. And your how long would be for units. So a 4 would be indicate for an hour, and how many hours it's going to activate for. So if your system activates, it's going to trigger your output 3, which is connected to your strobe, and it's going to activate for 8 hours. So make sure you don't reverse your piezo and your strobe, because your piezo will activate for 8 hours and annoy the hell out of your neighbors. So let's have a look at setting up an output. So when we push a remote control on our remote, it's going to trigger an output to open our garage door. So in your manual, you can see there's a 211. That means radio control 1. There's also a 213, which is also radio control 1, but not in away mode. So the difference is radio or 211 will always open and close your garage door, or always trigger that output, regardless if the system is set or unset. But if you make it a 213 event type, that will only open and close your garage door when you unset your system first. So you drive up the driveway, hit the unlock button on your remote, that'll disarm the area, and then it will allow you to open your garage door. If it's set to a 211, most people drive up the driveway, open the garage door opens, the detector activates and triggers your alarm. So not really relevant to what we're talking about, but whatever. So 211, and then your polarity, normally open 1 shot low. So this is a little bit confusing. I won't go through all of them, but pretty much if you think of a relay, normally open, 1 shot low, it goes closed for 2 seconds. So when you push the button, it will close the relay or trigger the output for 2 seconds and then open again. So that's the same as walking up to the push button, pushing the push button on the door and opening your garage door for you. And I guess that's it. So yeah, that's all. Thanks. Let's have a look at the Q&As. If you have any questions, please write them. Please write them in there now, and we'll have a look in them. Can I use both end of lines for one zone. Can I use both? Yeah. Not too sure what you mean. Are you talking about tamper per zone, maybe? I'm not too sure what you mean. I'll just read this next one. Zone types. You said input 8, location 316 was set to an 8. Hold up, isn't it a 9? Oh, no, that's zone 8. 316 was set to an 8. It is a 9. Yeah, I'm not too sure what I said. But zone 9 is a 24-hour tamper, so you are correct. Maybe I was just waffling on about something, but you're correct, Lance. What if the account number has a 0 in it? Do you still need to program it as a 10? No. I don't think you ever had to, but in the older panels, like the ICP CC404s or the 488s or 408s, and just to confuse everyone, if you have a 0 in your phone number, you would need to program your 0 as a 10. That only applies to phone numbers, not for your account number. Yes, you've just mentioned, or was that the receiver phone number with a 0 in it? So pretty much what I've just said. It's only for the phone number, not the account number or the subscriber ID. How would I trigger an alarm input on my CCTV system if it goes off? Trigger an alarm input on my CCTV system. That depends on your CCTV system, if it's got the inputs on the back. So if I understand what you're talking about, you can have a relay triggered to your output. So when your siren activates, you can trigger that relay and wire that relay common and normally open or normally closed, depending on what your CCTV system requires. Most of them you can specify normally open or normally closed. Wire that into your input. And then when the siren activates, it will trigger the input on your CCTV system, if that's what you're talking about. Check your spreadsheet. Okay. Double end of line. Can you zone double? Yes, we did cover that. Is there any future plan to have double end of line to monitor tamper per zone? I think that's available, yes. It's in the manual. There's a few wiring diagrams, which is available in there for you. Can I use a Bluetooth? Can I use a keypad using Bluetooth to turn off my system? Yes, if you listened to the webinar yesterday, we went over the 5-inch touchscreen, and that's got built-in Bluetooth, so you can pair your phone or smartwatch to the touch screen. So that way you're learning in your phone or smartwatch as a user. So if the system's on and you come home, it'll automatically pair with your phone or smartwatch, and it will know, hey, Brent's home, and it will disarm the system. Yeah. It's a UniView 304 MVR. Okay, I don't know off the top of my head, but if it's got the inputs in the back of the MVR, we could make something work for you. What I meant was, can I use a 3K3 and a 6K8 in one sensor for one zone? Only set up when not using zone doubling. Yes, for tamper per zone, pretty sure you can do that. Oh, zone doubling with smoke detectors. So this doesn't apply only to the 3000, but also depends on what smoke detector you're using, if it's a normally open or normally closed. So most smoke detectors these days have normally open or normally closed contacts in them. So if that is an option, I would definitely recommend you just wiring them as normally closed and just wiring your zone with your normally closed end of line in series like you normally do with a detector or a door read. If you wire it in normally open, if you're wiring it with normally open and you're zone doubling, the problem is when that activates, the normally open contact closes, obviously, and that would trigger both the high and the low zone that's sharing that same input. So most of the time you'd see activation on zone 9 and also a burglary on zone 1 when the system is on. that means it's wired up wrong. So ideally, you would use a normally closed smoke with the resistor in series. We do have a wiring diagram with, I think it was a 2 3K3s or 2 6K8s or a 1K5 or something. I'm not too sure off the top of my head, but if that's something that you find helpful, just send me an email and I can forward the wiring diagram to you. That applies to the older classic series panels, the Solution 3000 and also the 6000. So we have multiple diagrams on there for all of your smoke detector wiring. What if you have two remotes to open the gates? How to program it? So if I understand you correctly, you're probably talking about the output triggering. So that output, the event type 211, you just go back here. Can you all see that? Yeah, 211. So 211 or 213, that applies to all of your remotes learned into the system. So it doesn't matter if you have a second remote or 32 remotes, they will all point back to that one output, because that output is a remote control 1. So that basically means when you push the button on the remote control, it's going to trigger that output. There's also a 212 for remote control 2. So you can have gate on your button 1 and garage door on your button 2. So you rock up, push button 1, opens your gate, push button 2, it'll open your garage door for you. Okay, Peter, I got your email. I'll forward you that email. Okay, cool. Any other questions, anyone? All right. Okay, so how long did that take? That's a little over an hour. So I think we'll leave it at that for today. So thank you for attending once again. And tomorrow, make sure that you tune in. We're going to be having a look at setting up the B426M and how to connect to the panel via the B426M over Ethernet or remotely via the cloud and program up the panel using A-Link Plus. So thank you for attending, everyone, and see you again tomorrow. Thank you.